So if there is a secret to employing a good golf swing, it occurs right here. In all of the great swings that I've studied, there is no evidence of a stop and then a start that together reverse the direction of the club from the backswing to the downswing. At this point, it is interesting and also important to watch the left shoulder. Ken Venturi, the former U.S. Open champion and one of my main mentors, told me a really great idea, and that was that the left shoulder separates from the chin. That's very early in the downswing start. And this left shoulder starting forward and down away from the chin is a tremendous idea. Many ideas say that the left shoulder should go up at this stage, this way. But it really does not happen in a great ball striker. Venturi knew this from his time with Byron Nelson and Ben Hogan. Actually, there's a slight drift forward of the upper body as it's pulled by the lower body at this very stage as well. So from the top of the backswing, the left shoulder will separate slightly down and away from the chin, and there might even be a slight drifting of the upper body as it is pulled by this strong force from center or the left hip or the right knee kicking to start the downswing. The right shoulder is high and not pulled outward. So it has this look to it where the right shoulder actually stays back and you start down. Now that's a really important move. Another way to look at this is the shoulders look closed as the arms are starting down and as the body shifts forward. But remember, that chin is separated from the shoulder. This creates a major stretch between the shoulders and the hips. I call this the X Factor stretch.
So from step 4, this transition move with the lower body lateral movement towards the target, coupled with a rotation of the body, increases the differential or the X factor, and we call that the X factor stretch. Every good golfer does this move correctly. And if you're going to be a good ball striker, you need to have that correct sequence. And it's one thing that differentiates those guys like Cabrera who hit the ball tremendous distances with those who just hit at average distances.
The arms, hands, and club also respond to the actions of the lower body or lower center of the body. In the golf swing, the last thing to change direction at the top is the club head. This, of course, makes perfect sense because all of the centrifugal and centripetal force we apply in the swing is designed to do nothing else but to load the club head with energy and then deliver it down the proper path or proper plane. In the transition move, your arms and hands are actually quite passive. The club head might sink lower as the hips start to unwind. Your hands and wrists and arms respond to the reversal of direction. Now, your right elbow should drop into the proper slot by your right side. It comes right down its own plane and comes down right in front of the right hip. In the step 5 checkpoint position, in many ways, this will resemble step 3 position in the backswing. And by that I mean step 3 is when I was in this section right here. The club shaft now could point down pretty much at the target line. A lot of room for difference here. You can point down more even toward your toe line or even slightly outside the target line right here. But for argument's sake, in the perfect move, just about straight down to the target line. The difference is when we change direction and come back to the step 5 early checkpoint position, change of direction, the club is flattened. From the head-on view, it looks as if the hands and the club shaft were passing through the same positions they were in step 3, only it's considerably narrower. There is a sense that the hands are sort of free-falling down into the delivery position, and delivery is all the way down to this position right here, which we call step 5. The right shoulder will help determine the path of your downswing. Your right shoulder now, after it has started its forward move, will rock down and forward as the shoulder begins to unleash tremendous force in the swing. Thanks to the shoulder, your right elbow now drops into its proper slot and aligns from the head-on view right in front of your hip. This lowering of the right shoulder is in response to the legs initiating the forward motion. If the first motion is initiation by your right shoulder out toward the ball, you've got no chance to attain the correct position at step 5. And let me show you what I mean by that. If we are up here at step 4, top of the backswing, and you start by jutting your right shoulder out and your right elbow out, if I look back at this camera, that obviously throws my hands and my arms outside the plane. Now, there's an exception to this, and I'm going to talk about this a little later too. If I get very flat and around, I have to make that move out to the outside just to get the club back in the slot. And that is a way of playing, by the way, kind of in and over on plane swing. If the first move from the top is a downward tucking motion of the right shoulder, you're going to encounter some major problems here as well. Now, what happens with this response move with the right shoulder going down is that the spine tilts away from the target too much. You get underneath the shot too much. The club gets underneath the plane too much. Now, that means you're going to be bottoming out behind the golf ball. The bottom of your swing will be too far to the right of the golf ball. You'll also be too much inside out. This will cause you to generally hit fat shots, thin shots, push shots, or you will recover by turning your hands over faster and hitting some big hooks. So the idea of the right shoulder going straight down to start the downswing can be good for somebody that's going over top of the ball. It's not that we don't teach that, but what really happens, and I'd like to get into reality here in this DVD project, and that is when the shoulders start down correctly, there is that separation move, as Venturi taught me. The right shoulder stays high momentarily before it goes down. So that little movement at the top needs to be studied, looked at, checked in with, because it can go either way. If the arms go behind you, which a lot of good players do, if they tend to go a little flatter, then there is going to be a little outward move with the right shoulder. That will just get you back into the slot position. So we as teachers look at how you've coiled, where the left arm is at the top, to determine what the right shoulder does in the downswing. The right shoulder, by the way, is going to have a tremendous influence on where that club goes, where your hands and arms go. To clear up any possible misconceptions, I have not said that the first move in the downswing is made by the right shoulder. The downswing starts with the hips or the lower body or the right knee moving forward toward the target. The shoulder motion, good or bad, is a responsive motion that ties in with the hips or the lower body. In a model golf swing, the hands and arms are passive during this step, step 5 of the golf swing, and they respond to rather than initiate any action. The right elbow gives the appearance of attaching to the right side just above the right hip area. The left arm is fully extended from the body. With your right elbow near your right side and your left arm mostly straight, it's easy to see that step 5 is a very, very powerful position. Your hands and arms have not run off or initiated the downswing, but are simply responding accurately and appropriately to the correct body motions. And by the way, I think I need to repeat one more time a real fundamental of the 8-step swing, because you can't hear it too often, and that is the backswing is wider than the downswing, and it's wider because you have passive hands. The hands aren't tossing or throwing the club, and there is lateral motion to start the downswing. The club is much narrower in a proper downswing as you start down. Now, I do want to mention several other points. There are some times, and with some players, that we have to use different feels or different concepts, and you see these things taught or you hear them being taught. And one would be releasing the club right from the top of the backswing. Now, if you are a very active player from the lower body and you tend to get too much pull, the club gets too narrow to you on the downswing, a good idea for you would be to keep the right arm out away from you, to straighten the right arm out more early on, or to even feel a release of the golf club, a release of the head of the golf club. And the great Jack Nicklaus talked about releasing the club right from the top. The problem with that is 95% of the people do release too early from the top. So if they're now try to release from the top, they don't have Jack Nicklaus's move going forward. And if you watch Jack swing in slow motion, you would see that he had tremendous lag starting down. He didn't feel that. He felt like he released the club right from the top. So he's accurately giving you his concept of what's happening. And by the way, it can be good for a sliver of people out there playing the game. It's not something that you shouldn't try once in a while. Getting the club out to that target line can be a very, very good swing thought. But just remember, for most people, they have to feel that the club is staying back so that it can get in position to start down. And what we've gone through from step 4 to step 5 is tremendously important for a great majority of the people. The other thing I would say is when this left arm comes down, we will see quite a few really top players have some relaxation or bend in the left arm. It's not rigidly straight. So I don't want you to have the idea that I said that you have to be rigidly straight with the left arm. The elbow is actually pointing somewhat out in that direction. It's not really pointing back into your body. The key being, though, that the left arm is very close to your body starting down. You don't want to get it too much away from you or too separated out here. Anything that gets the club out here that promotes independent arm action and a stoppage of the body is not good. So let's take a look at the classic step 5 position, which is an online delivery halfway down. The club should not be outside your hands unless you intend to hit a cut. Now let's just take a look at that from the back camera. If the club head is coming down and I stop the video at this position, I can see the club head is outside my hands. I know that's going to cause an outside-in cutting action. This is usually a perfect illustration as well for casting the club. Someone that's released the club too soon to the outside or exaggerated the initial rotation of the shoulders. The delivery position, as I call it, will always show you what the golfer's impact position is going to be. It is a critical spot in the swing that determines all ball flight. It is always a position I carefully analyze in my teaching. At step 5, body weight is shifted back noticeably to the left leg. And at this stage right here, I would also say that you see a guy going right into the ground. We call this the sit-down position. Sam Snead was really famous for really showing this to the world. He had such a magnificent sit-down position. And the work that I've done with Sam Snead, which included time on the Golf Channel, doing an entire DVD series with Sam up at his home, and going to the Masters with him and staying with him. We talked a lot about this over time, of how he got into this sit-down position. He was aware of a sit-down, but he never tried to bend his knees outward, as some people have talked about. He didn't know that that really happened. He did have this gap between the knees, and this is a really crucial part of the correct move down, where you feel like you get into the ground right here as you start down into step 5, into transition and down into this delivery position. The rotation of the hips is diagonally left with the shoulders dramatically trailing. Your belt buckle, as viewed from the front, has slid significantly toward the target. From step 4 to step 5, that belt is shifted a long ways. This slide is a natural response to the body, the feet, and the legs initiating the downswing. It happens automatically in a sequence swing, which Dr. Neal has talked to us about. If you monitor the belt buckle on any top player, you'll immediately see the powerful lateral movement. At step 5, the shaft should have traveled down a path that, when viewed down the target line, is between the tip of the shoulder and the right elbow, which you can see in the picture. If the shaft stays in this safety zone with the butt end of the club pointing just outside the target line, but not at the ball target line, this indicates an on-plane swing. The shaft is parallel to the impact plane line, and solid contact and good trajectory is what you're going to get. In viewing the swings of amateurs, I sometimes see the shaft improperly low, beneath the elbow. In this case, the dotted line from the shaft hits the ground way beyond the target line. From this position, which I've talked about already, you'll push or hook the ball or hit behind the ball. Often you'll just make poor contact. So you've got to be aware of swing plane. Most of the time it's outside in, but sometimes, as I just mentioned, you'll get too far underneath. The safety zone is the area between the shaft plane at address and the Hogan plane. I brought this idea out in 1988, and many teachers now use it in their instruction, especially if they use computer technology. It's great for checking the downswing plane of the elbow, hand, shaft, and club head. One thing I'm always interested in is, where did the idea come from originally? I've read a lot of books, and Bobby Jones is obviously one of the greatest players of all time and a beautiful writer. And I've also done a tremendous amount of study on Ben Hogan. I've done 2 DVDs on Hogan and read a lot of Hogan, and then of course spent tremendous time with many of Hogan's contemporaries, people he played with, and that's been a wonderful thing in my life. I have noticed that in reading Jones' writing, this is just one of Bobby's books, that Ben Hogan took a tremendous amount of his writing out of Jones. And I know he knew Bobby Jones, but I really wasn't aware of how much of the ideas that Bobby Jones wrote about and talked about really went right into Power Golf and 5 Lessons. So much of Hogan's writing and Hogan's ideas came directly from Bobby Jones. Hogan transformed those ideas to become probably the finest ball striker in the history of the game of golf. I believe maybe only Lee Trevino has matched Hogan for the ability to own his golf swing and to have long-term mastery of the swing. Here are a couple of awesome Jones paragraphs that hold true today. The right hand remains relaxed and cocked until the angle between the left arm and the shaft of the club is at about 90 degrees. That's the step 5 checkpoint position. It is from this position to the point of contact with the ball that the straightening of the wrists and the final violent completion of the unwinding of the trunk produce maximum striking effort. In any full swing, correctly performed, the trunk will begin to unwind while the hands and arms are still going back, the most important movement in golf. As the downstroke begins, one should have the feel of leaving the club head at the top. For the checkpoint position at step 5, which is halfway down, this is your delivery position. If that club face is severely closed at this point in the swing, we are dead. That ball is going to be hit super low or hooked. If the club face is turned too far open, up toward the sky, you're going to hit the ball weak and off to right field. Now, you're going to hit the ball in a microsecond from here down to the golf ball. So you have the chance with a closed club face at the top to get it square halfway down, which a lot of really great players do, or an open club face to get square on the way down. So a person with an open club face, as they start down, might pull the back 2 fingers of the left hand and get the club face back to square, doing it that way. The closed club face player, which say Lee Trevino or a Bruce Litsky, when they start down, they rock a little more under, and that puts the club face square at this point. So really, the secret position for the square club face is at step 5, halfway down. If you're bad here, you don't have time to fix it.
Footwork drill. This is a drill where I employ the use of a wedge or 9-iron outside my right foot. I'm standing on the face of the club, which creates an angle with the shaft. The idea of this drill is to help you feel and understand the proper movement of the right leg as you transition. As we take the club back through our positions, that right leg stays braced. It's a pivot point for us on the backswing. As we start down and drop the club down into our delivery position, that club should move a little bit. It should release because I want the leg and the knee to move in this fashion to release the weight from that area. And when you do that, you see that shaft moving down. That's a tactile response that you can see and feel. It's a nice way to ensure that you're not hanging back. A lot of our students who come to the school want to hang back on their right foot. If I did that, that shaft wouldn't move at all. But if I properly make my transition, start down with the lower body, you see a little bit of release in that shaft. Try this drill if you tend to hang back on your right side or you don't feel like you're getting into a proper delivery position. It will help.
A great drill for getting sequence is called the baseball step drill. And the way we do this is first have people do it without a golf ball. And you would start behind the ball. I'm going to move my club 8 to 10 inches behind the golf ball, and you start with a very narrow stance. I'm going to do a practice swing first. So the way we do this is we start a nice free arm swing away from the golf ball, very loose and relaxed. And as the club just travels past the waist-high position, I step and swing forward. Now, this gives you the two-way motion that I talked about in the previous segments. There's the club going back while you're going forward. Very tough thing to teach, tough thing to try to do when you're actually swinging, but very easy to do with the baseball step drill. So it goes like this. Swing back, step through. Now, when people first do it, there will be a tendency to swing back and stop and then step with everything, which looks very uncoordinated when you see that. So it looks, that would be the incorrect way of doing it. You've got to get the motion, the feel. It's the same as when I take a ball and throw it. When my arm is going back, I'm stepping forward. So there's a separation there. Again, if I went back to my baseball coaching days of little leaguers, sometimes we had to teach kids this little separation of the hands and the step and the throw. So it's the sequence. Step, turn, throw. When you do that throwing motion, your arm goes into a great throwing move. And when I do this same drill right here with the golf club, I'm going to get my right arm to work the same way, just like a whip. Now, I wouldn't recommend doing this with a 3-wood. I do this with a 7-iron or an 8-iron teed up. Start with the club, as I said, 8-10 inches behind the ball, feet very close together. We take it back. You don't have to swing particularly hard. Swing through. You'll get the great feeling of things working athletically. I love this drill. I think it could really help you. Give it a try. The high tee drill. This is a tremendous drill for someone that's having trouble driving the ball or hitting bad fairway wood, something that's too steep on the golf ball. I had a young assistant working for me in New York who was having that very problem. Terrible driving. And when he left to go back to Arizona, I gave him this drill to use with a 5-wood. We started doing it in New York, and then his mission was to do it for the whole winter. When he came back the next year, he was like a completely different person. He actually became a terrific driver of the golf ball and is now a head professional. Has done very well. What we did is tee up a ball quite high off the ground, like you would for a driver, except you use your highest lofted club. This is a 5-wood I've got right here. So it's got a very thin face. Any downward striking, you'll pop the ball straight up in the air, can even whiff it. So you hold the club well above the ground and you make some relatively easy swings to start with. But you've got to get a nice little transition move, and I would also suggest you do some little pumps halfway down, because if you find that you're coming steep on top of the golf ball, you are going to pop this golf ball up, put sky marks on the top of your club. So you've got to get a nice flat blow here where the club is traveling very level to the ground or even slightly on an upward move going through the golf ball. If you're a person that slides ahead of the golf ball, this is going to be a nightmare drill for you as well. So again, if you're the right type of person, trouble driving the golf ball, pop the ball up, don't make solid contact, this little drill right here with the high tee and the lofted wood with a very thin face is tremendous. So I would suggest just small swings when you start. Now, when you do that swing right, you'll probably leave the tee right in the ground. You're going to pick the ball right off the top of the tee, and you repeat that. I'd like to have you do 20 or 30 of those successfully. When you hit the ball correctly, it'll go out with just a slight draw on it. That would be the ideal shot pattern that I'm looking for with the 5-wood off the high tee. You get this drill done, and believe me, you are really going to improve your driving game. I believe one of the real interesting death moves that we picked up by doing lots of video work with my staff was called, or is called, shaft tip over. And by that I mean the club goes from a flat position to a steep position from step 4 to step 5. So in your step 5 position, the butt end of the club is pointed down at your toe line. So the person might have their arms on the inside, everything might be looking good with the wrists, but the club has gotten very steep and oftentimes looks very close to them as they start down. Now you're in a trap position because the club is too vertical and you're too much into your body. It could also be where it's just too steep and it's out away from your body. But any movement where the club goes dramatically out this way, the club head moves out, which I call tipping over, that's a death move. It is not the easiest one to correct either. There's a lot of work that has to be done to work on that club staying on plane starting down, or, as most good players do, actually flatten on the downswing. One of the more common death moves in the average golfer is that they move or drift past the golf ball when they start down. So everything slides ahead of the golf ball. Now, we've talked about this through step 5 of the correct motions. On a short iron, your head is going to be very much on top of the ball or even slightly ahead of where it started. But you can't really drift past and slide past any shot. On a driver's shot, there is no player on the PGA Tour, the LPGA Tour, that slides their head in front of the initial starting position. Many, many great players, by far the majority, actually have their head drop back somewhat with the driver's swing. You must not let your body slide and your head slide past the golf ball. One of the most common death moves that I see with fairly good players, oftentimes club pros who come to me for lessons or come to our staff for lessons, and they're hitting a lot of hooks, a lot of blocks, and when they get in a tournament they shoot high scores because it's very difficult to get out of this death move right here, and that is when the club gets underneath the right arm and gets stuck too far inside out. So when you get into this position and the club actually drops behind you and the club head gets underneath your hands at step 5, you are really in a bad position. You're coming up out of your shot. You're going to hit a lot of thin shots for a good player, and the worst thing is you're going to miss one ball to the right, and then the very next shot you're going to miss it way to the left. It's a two-way miss. I'm going to take you through a review of important checkpoints. Now, you don't need to go through this entire list for you yourself, but pick out 1 or 2 of these important items, and I'm sure 1 or 2 will apply to your game. Here's the first one. When you start down from step 4 to step 5, the right knee has to move the correct way. It can be an initiator for your downswing, but it does not slide straight across. The right knee kicks out past the golf ball in a diagonal move, and you'll feel weight come off the instep of the right foot. Another checkpoint. As you start down, it's imperative that your hips have shifted forward, so your weight is getting over to the left post. Weight shifting through the center section of your body, or the hips, into a square position. By the time you get to step 5, is really important. And by that I mean by the time you get that club to here, those hips have already gotten to square. They have not stayed in a closed position starting down this way or spun out too quickly. The head. The head position in golf, of course, is very important. Now your head is likely to rotate slightly, where the chin moving to the right, or your head will drift slightly to the right in most power golf swings. Now, when we start down from step 4 to step 5, the head is going to recenter back into its impact alignments. And when it gets to step 5, your head now stabilizes for that moment in time when you come to hit the golf ball. Your head cannot be in the process of moving all over the place in step 5. You want to be able to return your head into the correct hitting position as you start down. So be careful that your head doesn't drift back too much or slide forward too much. Another checkpoint that is somewhat controversial and a lot of people don't understand is that most great players lower as they start down. The head will actually drop slightly. So from the back view, I'll oftentimes look at the right ear to see that it's actually starting down, or at least staying where it was. We don't want to see as you start down from step 4 to step 5 that your head is pulling back and away. So when you review your video, the clips on the computer, make sure that you see that that right ear is staying in position or moving downward slightly, and then you'll be making a move like a top tour player. In the step 5 checkpoint positions, we look at the right heel. And this again is a controversial point among a lot of teachers. But from studying, again, tons of golf swings and really seeing what's happening, I want you to understand that the right heel, as we start down at this very initial point, goes into the ground. There's a strong movement downward. But very quickly, and even by the time we get to step 5 in a full-out golf swing, that right heel will be just starting to come off the ground. And that's a very important power move, that you're starting to come out of the ground or off the inside part of your right foot by the time you get to step 5. If you get up too quick, that's a mistake. But also, where you get sitting back on your right foot, where you're going to be on your right heel at impact, is usually a very bad mistake. Anyone that's listened to me speak on golf knows that I've studied Hogan a lot. And one of the big ideas that Ben Hogan talked about and that I use in my teaching a lot is the movement of the left knee. And he wanted that left knee to start in a little semicircular motion where it went right over his left foot to start the downswing. So that's from step 4 to step 5. As you start down, that left knee has a little circular motion, semicircle motion, and leads the hip. You must not get where you do this kind of move where the hip gets in front of the knee. So you can guide your downswing with a little Ben Hogan idea right there. It's a terrific little tip. A wonderful checkpoint from step 4 to step 5 is the sit-down position. And there's been quite a bit of discussion among many teachers on how this happens and is it important? Well, it's really important. It's a major piece of how we teach the downward move to the golf ball at all of my golf schools. So as you start down, there's a definite little sit down, we call it a little squatting position as you start down right here. And it's something that can be practiced. You can do that in front of a mirror. You can certainly check it when you look at your video clips. If you see that you get into your backswing position and come up out or get too quick here, you've missed that critical sit-down position and you're going to hit many poor golf shots. Now, starting down from step 4 to step 5, of course we're looking at the shaft plane. Super important to hitting the golf ball solid and straight. So you have to be on plane. Now you're either, as you start down step 5 in transition, you're either on plane or you're not. If you're not, the club is too horizontal, that's underneath, inside out, or it's too steep. We monitor shaft plane by looking at the target line and the line of the shaft at impact. I had mentioned to you throughout this DVD that the shaft points outside, slightly outside that target line at this point. You're on plane when that shaft gets back to pointing right straight down your target line at the exact step 5 delivery position right here. So that is a major key and something that we work on with a lot of our students all the time to work on their shaft plane and how that club is coming down. When you think about your shoulders in the downward start of the golf swing, it's really important to understand that the shoulders lag back behind the lower body starting down. Now, it's possible to jump off too quick with your shoulders and have the shoulders too far behind. Usually this is only the better players who are really too quick, too fast with their lower body, or somebody that spins out too quick. That gets too much lag, too slow with the shoulders, or too fast with the lower body. They're not synchronized. You do not want your shoulders to catch up right away with your hips when you start down, but there is that movement as we start down where the shoulders sort of lag back and the lower body starts down. From this position, though, those shoulders are going to start to unwind and spin around this fixed axis, which is your spine. And those shoulders are going to provide a huge amount of power. It's just that at the very beginning, at transition, you must be careful not to overuse the shoulders. An interesting separation occurs from step 4 to step 5, and it's between the distance between your hands and your right shoulder. And as you start down, that angle or that distance starts to increase. So we don't start down too much like this, and sometimes I see people who are trying to lower their right shoulder or raise their left shoulder to start down. They get too much like this, and they get crunched up, and they don't get that separation. So this natural action for a good player is as we shift forward, the arms are lowering into position. They get sort of a free ride with the lower body providing the pull in this golf swing, but there is that separation move right down where it's not totally connected. You don't maintain this exact position right here long in your downswing at all. As you start down, the right elbow is underneath the left arm as you start down. That is an absolute must checkpoint for you. In early step 5, transition, that right elbow comes underneath the left arm, and that's right from the straight on view, camera at about 50 inches off the ground or at chest height. You will see that right elbow become visible. If you don't, if you see at that point where the right arm's on top, you're usually casting or throwing the club, or you're outside in, that would be a real mistake. So check to see if you look like a pro golfer starting down where that right elbow gets underneath this left arm. Remember, going back, the right arm's on top, coming down, the right elbow goes underneath. You know, there's a lot of discussion on the club getting stuck or too far behind the body, but let's be realistic here. If you look at the greatest players in the world and we use this camera and we look at the club coming down, it actually looks like it's coming down your back. It definitely looks like it's coming from behind the body. Now, I don't know how you want to define where the club is, but to me the club head's out in front of the body when you get more out in this position. That would be out in front. Well, nobody wants to be out there, and that's where we find a lot of the people that come to our schools. They've got the club too far out in front. Then they read an article by a top tour player who says, I'm trying to get the club more out in front of me, get the arms and the club more out in front. Well, that takes about 5 million more people down the wrong path from reading that article. Now, it's not the tour player's fault, because that is what he's feeling. He is too far behind. The club can get stuck, but it's a very small percentage of people that we see in our golf schools who get the club too far behind them. One of the ideas I like to talk about is the rate of return, or how fast you turn back to the target, and particularly with the shoulders. So one of the ideas that works pretty well for anyone having difficulty drawing the golf ball is to actually retard this shoulder move starting down. Slow your target turn with your shoulders. You're going to turn to the target eventually at the end of your swing with the shoulders facing the target. But let's not get our shoulders facing that target too soon. At step 5, the classic step 5 checkpoint position, we're looking at where the golf club is at the halfway down position. Now you remember in step 2, the club was out here fairly close to the same position, except now the right arm's much closer to us, our weight is shifted forward, and we must have that club face in a good position here at step 5 because we're hitting the ball in a microsecond. Another couple of things to look at. One is that my left wrist is nice and flat at this position and my right wrist is cocked back. That's a position I see with all top ball strikers. The other thing is I love the idea of having the hands low here. I do see some people coming into what looks like a pretty good impact or step 5 position, but it's too high. The hands are up too much and they're going to come in steep to the golf ball. So I do love this idea of having the hands a little lower, more right off the right thigh, the club down. This is going to give me a nice solid impact zone right here where I've got a nice strike to the golf ball. My angle of attack, the descent's going to be really good. From up here, it's going to be too steep. Here's a little tip for the person that cups the wrist or gets the toe down, gets the club face open at the top, which a lot of great players do, by the way, one being Ben Hogan, would be as you start down, you supinate or bow the left wrist starting down. I also use the Mickey Wright idea where she talked about turning that left hand down by pulling or tugging on the back 3 fingers, or back 2 fingers really, of the left hand. And that causes the wrist to bow or supinate, as Hogan would say. And when you make that move from an open club face, when you've got it a little cupped and you start down this way, you get that club face back to square at step 5. So it's a little trick you can use. Mickey Wright probably had the greatest swing of anyone that's ever lived. A lot of people think she had the most beautiful and efficient golf swing of anyone that's ever played the game. I've studied her books. I've had a chance to communicate with her, certainly watched her golf swing. It is a beautiful thing. And one of her tips was that little move with the left wrist.